Hey everybody, we are gonna make some cucumber dill salad. It is officially summer eating time. This is my favorite time of year. I love all the fresh produce coming out of the garden. And this is a really lovely summer salad. In fact, last year I made this and introduced my intern to it that I had working for me, and she completely fell in love with it, and I think they made it about 100 times. She was a huge cucumber eater, and so I gave her the recipe and she took it home and ate it all summer. This is a Cook's Illustrated recipe originally. It's very simple, but one of the keys is to actually salt and then let drain the cucumbers so that they're not super watery. And so we're gonna do that first. I'm growing a bunch of different kinds of cucumbers this year. This is actually a Japanese cucumber. I will put the variety up on the screen. So it's extra long. The recipe calls for English cucumber, which are typically the cucumbers that you see in the grocery store that are wrapped in plastic. And that also works, obviously, but honestly, any kind of cucumber you have works. The one thing to be aware of with cucumbers is that they do get bitter in the heat. Not all varieties, but certain varieties. And so if you're using something like a regular pickling cucumber, which will work for this recipe, just be sure to taste it first and make sure that it's sweet and lovely and that it hasn't gotten bitter, because they will sometimes get bitter, particularly pickling cucumbers. This is the second kind of cucumber I have that I'm growing this year. I'll put the name of this one up. This was a free seed packet from a seed swap that I thought I'd give a try. And then this is a third kind of cucumber this year. This is a lemon cucumber, and I've been growing these since I've been eating these since I was a kid. My stepmother grew them in her garden every year. It's an old heirloom variety. It's been around for something like 100 years. And they don't get bitter in the heat. So they are a really lovely cucumber to grow, even in the dead of summer. They're a little finicky because of the shape, and so they're kind of tough to peel. But they are a lovely, fresh eating cucumber. I have a friend of mine back in Colorado who just lives for these, and so I kind of tease her. And every year when they start coming in, I send her pictures by text message, because I'm not in Colorado anymore, but she loves them. This is a really great variety. I love this particular kind of cucumber. They are called lemon cucumbers not because they taste like lemons, but because of the shape. And then as they get ripe, if you were to leave this on the vine, they do turn yellow. And so they start looking like a lemon as they get larger. This is about the size that you want them to be to harvest. You can eat them when they're a little bit bigger than this, but then the seeds start getting pretty big. And so you want to harvest them smaller rather than larger. I generally do not want to harvest them once they're yellow. And so I like them to be on the green side. Or the really almost white side. Have you ever tried any of the white cucumbers that are out there? There's some really nice ones. I grew one years ago called salt and pepper that was white with the little black spikes on it, and so it looked like it had been peppered. A lot of times the white cucumbers are really tasty. There's a million different kinds of vegetables out there of different varieties, and so don't be afraid to try some new things that don't look exactly like the thing that you've always purchased in the grocery store. It's really fun to experiment with different things. This called for 2 English cucumbers. English cucumbers are pretty good sized, probably not quite as big as this, but bigger than this. And so I'm just gonna put all 3 of these together and call it good. This is a mandolin. This particular one is a Japanese variety called a Benriner, I think, if I'm saying that right, made in Japan. I've had other mandolins, haven't loved them. This is one that is really popular with chefs. And so in my frustration recently, I decided to purchase one of these. They're inexpensive. This is the old school version. There's evidently a newer version, and I really like it. Very sharp. Keep your fingers out of the way. I'm just checking thinness here. I like my cucumbers pretty thin. So that's starting to look about where I want this, and this is just adjusted with a screw on the bottom. The trick here, obviously, is to go very carefully and to not accidentally turn your finger into a cucumber slice, because that is very unpleasant. And if you've ever used a mandolin for any length of time, you've probably done that at least once. It's pretty easy to do. But it does make really short work of this kind of thing, where you're gonna have to very thinly slice something, and it's gonna be super tedious to do that by hand. And so it's a very nice tool to have on hand, and I like that it's all manual. I like that it's easy to clean. You could do this in a food processor, obviously, as well, with a slicing blade, but then you have to clean your whole food processor, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. So it's nice to have something that works well, that you don't have to, it's not a huge production to clean it when you're finished. I think these come in different colors too, so you can kind of match your kitchen if you want. I just happen to like I tend to default to green or black or white. I'm not real experimental when it comes to my colors on my kitchen gadgets. So we're gonna slice these nice and thin, and then we're gonna salt them and put them in a colander and just let them drain. Cucumbers are 96% water. That's a lot of water. And so we wanna salt and drain a little bit of that water out if we can, in order to not have it just be a big soup. What happens is once they're cut, you've sliced a lot of those plant cells, and when you put the dressing over it, if you don't salt and drain things first, all that water comes out in the dressing as it sits, and you end up with a really watery dressing after it's sat for a little while. And so this is an effort to, see, that's all a cleanup I do. I just literally rinse it off. Yeah, so having it sit in some salt to drain off some of that water is going to keep you from having really diluted salad dressing that goes on this when you're finished. So we're just going to slide all of this in here. We're having cucumber salad, pork chops, and some corn for dinner. So we are definitely in summer eating mode. It's too early for local corn here. It's middle of July, and actually we're right about now is maybe when we start seeing corn grown locally, assuming we had a normal year. We had a really cold, wet spring, and so I don't think we're gonna be seeing fresh corn locally until August, would be my guess. So this is grocery store corn, probably out of California, but it's still gonna be good. 2 teaspoons kosher salt. Kosher salt is more coarse than regular table salt. If you only had table salt, I would say cut this to a teaspoon instead of 2, because there's a lot more volume to kosher salt. And if you just are the kind of person that only keeps one kind of salt in the house, which is totally understandable, you probably want to cut this amount of salt in half. Kosher salt is known for its ability to dissolve quickly, and so it's part of one of the reasons it's used in kosher meat. because you want it to pull out and salt impurities and drain away impurities in the meat. I'm making sure here, because of the way these were sliced, they're going to really easily stack. It'd be really easy for some of these to stick together and not actually get any salt on them. So I'm just kind of massage everything around a little bit here, make sure everybody's got a good dose of salt. Okay. Already tasty. And we're just gonna let those sit for 30 minutes while my cucumbers are draining. I'm gonna go ahead and make the dressing. And so this calls for 1/3 cup of plain Greek yogurt. I don't happen to have Greek yogurt. I'm not gonna worry about it. This is a non-fat yogurt. So it's not gonna be quite as thick as it would be if I had Greek yogurt. But that's okay. I am gonna drain away this liquid that you see in there. That's just whey that has separated from the yogurt. I am gonna drain that off just so it's not adding water to the dish here. I really love rubber spatulas. Like on my must-have kitchen utensils, this is definitely one of them. And I like the old-fashioned kind with the wooden handles. Not silicone, but actually rubber. And it's surprisingly hard to find these. I actually got onto Amazon a couple of years ago when I was starting to have a hard time finding them locally, and I ordered like several sets. And so I have a whole bunch of extra of these because they do wear out over time. Because I was really tired of not being able to find them, and I particularly like a rubber spatula and not a silicone spatula. All right, so 1/3 cup of yogurt, 4 teaspoons cider vinegar, a tablespoon extra virgin olive oil. I like an apple cider vinegar that is with the mother, so that tends to be Bragg's, but there are other brands, natural food brands. If I'm doing canning and stuff, I don't use this for canning, but for eating, I do like. And the mother is just the original fermentation. It's a little bit like if you've ever made kombucha and you see the SCOBY. That's a lot of what the mother looks like in vinegar. So it's this bacterial mat that turns alcohol in cider into vinegar. And it's good for you. It's a probiotic. And so I prefer my cider vinegar with the mother. I actually have a recipe on my blog for how to make your own vinegar if you feel really experimental and you want to try that. It's a really fun project. So when I'm cooking with olive oil, I tend to use an inexpensive brand. If I'm putting it raw into salad, I like to use a better quality. California Olive Ranch is a really nice brand of olive oil that isn't crazy expensive, but it's a little better than just your run-of-the-mill store-bought extra virgin olive oil. 2 teaspoons Dijon mustard. This is a homemade Dijon. I will put a link to my blog post on how I make this in the comments below or in the description below. It's a fun project as well. And the reason the Dijon is in here, obviously it's for flavor, but it's also to emulsify. Mustard is a really good natural emulsifier, and an emulsifier is something that will make oil and water stay mixed. And so that's part of why you see Dijon mustard in salad dressings a lot. And so part of what this is in here for is to help keep that mixed, but a lot of it is obviously for flavor as well. Yeah, just this gets mixed together. And then we're gonna slice a shallot. You could use a red onion on this or green onion in this. It doesn't have to be a shallot. Shallot sounds all fancy and swanky and kind of bougie. And I happen to grow them, so I happen to have a shallot sitting in my windowsill right now that the gophers ate the very bottom off of. And so it's a little early for them, but I have one. But don't feel like you have to use a shallot. Shallot is it's stronger than an onion, but not as strong as garlic. So I always describe it as it's if onion and garlic had a baby. And so if you were going to use just regular onion in this instead of a shallot, I would probably double the amount of onion in here if you don't happen to have a shallot on hand. And then They come in a lot of different sizes, and I always love when they just say large shallot, like that's some kind of standard when it's really not, and they vary tremendously. So you just have to go with how much you like. This shallot, again, this is a homegrown shallot, beautiful color, and very round. It had started to rot a little bit at the bottom, so I'm just going to peel off this outer layer. And then I will probably just take off the second layer, but only on the bottom because I don't want to waste the top. And there you go. So just like that, we're good. And again, this is pretty good sized. I'm not sure if I want to put the whole thing in there. I think I'm just going to do half of that. It's up to you how much oniony flavor you want. And because we have our mandolin out, I am just going to slice this on the mandolin rather than dicing it. And I want this to be wafer thin. I'm trying to remember what movie that's from where he says wafer thin. And we'll probably slice this and then run my knife through it just so that there aren't super huge bites. This is where you get in trouble and slice your fingers off if you're not careful. When you get down to these little itty bitty pieces. All right, good enough. Isn't that pretty? Just lovely. My ridiculously small paring knife here. I'm feeling lazy and not wanting to dig my chef knife out right now. Okay. And honestly, I'm just going to throw that directly into the dressing. And let it sit and give it a stir. The other thing this calls for is a 1/4 cup of fresh dill. I actually don't have any fresh dill right now. I have a lot of dill growing, but most of it is past the frond stage and it's starting to make seed heads, which means if I go out and try to collect fronds, they're going to be kind of dried and kind of fussy. And actually, I actually don't love dill. It's it's one of the few herbs that I use in very small amounts because I think it can super overpower something. And so general rule of thumb, if you're using dried herbs instead of fresh, just cut the amount in half. And so this calls for a 1/4 cup of fresh, which would mean 1/8 of a cup or 2 tablespoons dried. And then because I'm not a giant fan of dill, I'm probably going to cut that in half again. And so I'm just going to put a tablespoon of dried dill in here. There it is. So I'm going to use a tablespoon of dried. You do you. If you love dill, use the full amount, or by all means use fresh if you want to buy it from the store or if you're growing it in your garden. Oops. Dill seems to go from like where the fronds are easy to harvest to the fronds are drying up and it's all about the seed very quickly. And believe it or not, dill is actually a cold season plant. I've had it reseed in March in my garden. And so it's actually pretty hard to get it fresh and ready when cucumber season comes because it is such an early plant. And it goes to seed really quickly. It doesn't love the heat. And so you can plant it late, but it will go to seed pretty fast. And so it's tough to get dill fronds. But if you're making pickles, you generally use the seed head anyway. All right, I'm going to just, as an extra, I'm going to put some fresh ground black pepper in there because I think that makes sense. All right, there we go. Now we'll be back in a half an hour or maybe 20 minutes to throw the rest of the cucumbers into this mix. Okay, we're back. Our cucumbers have been draining for about 30 minutes. You can see they've definitely gotten a little more floppy. Some of that water has come out of there. I'm just trying to pile them up and give them a good shake. I just left this over the sink, so I didn't actually measure. Sometimes it's fun to put that over a plate and see how much actually comes out. And then our dressing is ready. So we're just gonna put these together. Like so. No need for additional salt because there's plenty of salt in the cucumbers. Just give this a nice mix and then let it stand for 5 minutes or so before we eat. It's gonna make a lovely side salad. I wanted to show you guys that because, remember I mentioned cucumbers are 96% water. Because of that, most cucumbers in the grocery store, if they don't have plastic around them, are waxed. And that natural or that food grade wax helps keep them from drying out super fast in the grocery store so that they don't have to, you know, sell them within a day. If you've ever picked homegrown cucumbers and thrown them in your crisper and had them go bad or get soft really super fast, that's why, because they don't have much of a natural wax. I like to keep mine in an actual storage container that seals, and it helps keep the humidity in. These were picked. This one was picked today. This one was picked yesterday. I can feel this one is a little bit softer, but putting that in a container where the humidity is really high and it's sealed so that the moisture isn't gonna evaporate off can help make these store longer in the fridge. They still are going to need to be used within generally a week at the very outside. So cucumbers are just not going to last as long, homegrown cucumbers, as they do from the grocery store. And so plan on doing something with them pretty quickly. But if you keep them in a sealed container, very dry in there, so like no standing water because they also will mold and rot really quickly. So high humidity, but also no standing water. It's a little tricky to get that right. That will help them last longer. And it also helps if you pick them early in the morning when the day is a little bit cooler, and then throw them in a sink full of cool water to cool them down before you put them in the fridge. So those are your tips and tricks for cucumbers. And I think our salad is ready to go. So there you have it, cucumber dill salad, the epitome of summer eating right there. Enjoy.